Hey, I'm Taylor Dorsett, and this is the Professional Technical Interviewee. Technical interviews are hard, and every company does them differently. On this show, I interview engineering leaders to see what they look for in technical candidates, and then they perform a real technical interview with me. I hope you enjoy. I guess today is Arne Saupe, who's currently the VP of Technology at Farmer's Fridge. Before that, you were with Trunk Club and a number of other companies in the Chicagoland area, including some trading firms. Did I miss anything in the intro there?
Yeah, I've bounced around a lot, but I've been doing this for 30 years, so I think that's good enough.
Sure, cool. Well, can you share a little bit about Farmer's Fridge and kind of the teams you oversee right now and what the company looks like?
So, Farmer's Fridge, we produce fresh food every day, and we sell most of our food is sold in vending machines. We're also in some retail locations. You can find us in Jewel in the Chicago area, Targets in the Chicago area, and also some Targets on the East Coast. And we also have a delivery business, so we sell food and packages, and that's through about 42 states. We'll do delivery, and you can find us our vending machines in about 19 states. So, and we'll take in fresh ingredients, process it, assemble it, package it, and distribute it every day, sending it across the country. So it's a pretty big operation to get that out, since it's obviously got a short shelf life, so you got to get it to people as fast as you can.
Sure. For anyone who hasn't tried Farmer's Fridge, when I worked out of 1871 in the merchandise mart, Farmer's Fridge had a vending machine there, and I think I ate a salad from there probably most days for 2 years, and it was significantly better than waiting 45 minutes in line for some salad that was going to be $5 more and probably didn't taste as good.
I remember I had a similar kind of experience. We had one, 150 North Wacker, and there was a Starbucks there. And if I worked late and through lunch, I would go to the Starbucks and get food. And I probably shouldn't brag on Starbucks, but Starbucks food is terrible. Like their lunch food is awful. So they put one next to it, and somebody told me you should try this. They put a new vending machine with salads in there. I'm like, my first reaction was, a salad out of a vending machine. Like, I want to eat that. But they told me the salads are really good, and they are really good. It was much better than eating the Starbucks food.
Yeah, absolutely. It's still my go-to when I'm in O'Hare. Or I guess you said now expanded to a lot of different airports, so I got to keep an eye open now. Great. Can you share a little bit about the kind of the tech stack and the teams that you oversee?
Sure. We've got a couple of different engineering teams. We've got an IT team, got a data engineering team, and one data scientist, but we're building that out. So, so that's the group. We basically focus for the engineering, we focus in two areas. There is the more consumer focused area, which we call the revenue team. So it's those things that generate new revenue. And then we have what we call the supply chain team. And that's basically handling all of the processing of the food, the distribution of food, all those things, the internal processes for their operations team. To do that, data engineering team, which obviously consolidates all the data and the data science, so we can apply both those learnings to A, serving our customers better, and B, making our operations more efficient. So they consolidate the data, but they also work on getting us information from that data to do a better job there. And the IT team, which also is our service techs, so they standard IT stuff, setting up your PCs, operations, but also a team of people to go out in the field, and we'll fix the vending machines when they're broken.
Nice. And is it still like Python and JavaScript focused?
Yep. Yeah. So we are Python, a little bit of Go and Java, but we do everything serverless. So we have a serverless stack. We use Kinesis for our messaging, DynamoDB in our backend. We have React front ends. We also have some Android and iOS developers. So it's high level, that's our stack.
Nice. Great. Can you share a little bit about your pathway into technology? I know you said you've been doing it for 30 plus years. Maybe we're reaching back, but I'm always curious how people got started.
I was at school. My father was a professor, so I went to school for free. So I spent quite a few years in college just, without a real direction, because we weren't paying for it. And then at some point I decided I needed to get a degree. So I'd already taken quite a bit of computer science classes. So I just kind of focused on that. I enjoyed it, and I'd made some progress, but it was a two factor. Like, I wanted to get a degree, and two, I enjoyed it. So I already went down that. I went down that path. Literally, it was kind of a choice of having to pick a degree and kind of liking it. So I got it from there. And my first job was from my roommate who I don't know how he knew this guy who was trying to start a consulting firm. So he was looking for some cheap resources. So
Sure.
I think he paid me $9.50 an hour to go to Alcoa's steel plant in the Cleveland area to do some programming for them. So I made
Nice.
$9.50 an hour for my first engineering job.
Hey, well, there you go. I tell people all the time, like, get something that pays, right? It might not be the job
Yeah.
you want, but at least it's something on a resume, right?
And yep, it was converting one database to another. So I did get some Oracle experience there, which used to matter, but now,
Sure.
now we've changed, the world has changed again.
Yeah. Well, how'd you end up with Farmers Fridge?
Uh, Basically, Candace, who was the VP of engineering at Trunk Club, she came to Farmers Fridge and she recommended me. So I was her director of engineering and she was the CTO. And Candace has moved on, so I moved up to the VP of tech. But it was basically through my connection with Candace that I started there.
Yeah, great. I like to, I don't know, point out and just tell folks, if you do good work, those are the people who will remember you, right? Especially if they go to a similar situation. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but probably when you joined Trunk Club, there was kind of that scaling period, right? And then it seemed like Farmers Fridge was trying to do a similar thing, right? So Candace knew you had that background and the ability to do that, right?
And we were much earlier at Farmers Fridge. Trunk Club was struggling a little bit with, they had a kind of outgrown their tech stack. So they were at a bigger scale, but they were getting to the point where their tech stack couldn't really handle the load.
Sure.
Farmers Fridge, we got in early enough so that the tech was, I think there was 5 engineers when I started. So, and we've got about 33 to 35 people right now, so, we were early enough to be able to adjust the tech stack before it got to start failing.
Sure. So that seems like quite a bit of growth over the last couple of years, especially through, COVID years, right? So I guess have you done technical interviews lately, and what are you particularly looking for your team or for various different teams there?
In general, yeah. I mean, I'll interview all the candidates. Usually I'll leave most of the technical interviews to the engineers, right? And the engineering managers. But at times, you may be missing an engineering manager or somebody's out. So I'll hop into those things. I'm comfortable doing a technical interview. I hesitate to do it though, because I think it's intimidating having to talk to the VP of tech and have them ask them technical questions, right? So I try to not do that too much. But yeah, I've done it in the last year. I've probably done 10 to 15.
I've never even thought about that, of it being like more intimidating, but that's absolutely correct, right? If I'm thinking of talking to a senior engineer, right, or someone that might be a peer, like, okay, well, we're probably of similar mindsets, or if they have different opinions, their opinion doesn't come with 30 years of experience, I should be intimidated by it, right?
Right.
Versus...
Or if I fundamentally disagree with something, you're going to go like, oh, I totally screwed up the interview. Like,
sure,
and
right,
you feel like you may be able to debate with an engineer why your solution is better. You're probably not going to want to debate with your boss's boss about why your solution is better.
Right. Especially if, first day out the job is like, oh, there's that guy I argued with at the interview, right? Yeah, interesting. Cool. What are you typically evaluating for when you're interviewing for Farmers Fridge?
Yeah, there may be some special cases, but in general, just the ability to think through a problem, solve it. So I don't really worry too much about people's past technology stacks and what they've done, as long as so like even though we're Python, we have coding exercise, we'll accept it in any language that you want to do, right? And it's whatever you're most comfortable with, because we just want to be able to see that you can solve the problem, you can think through it, because my general perception is if you do that well, you can do it whatever your technology stack is, you'll learn it, right? So it's really just and seeming to enjoy it as well, really wanting to solve that problem and being excited about being able to prove what you did.
Yeah. Does that tie into like being excited about the kind of the business model as well, or is it more about solving technical problems?
Both. I'd like to know people, I kind of divide it into, when you're looking for a job, you should be looking for, different things. One, you should be looking for a product that you believe in, right? You should care about that, Bitcoin is a real thing and it's cool, but if you don't really care about Bitcoin, you probably shouldn't be working for a company that is, some sort of investment around crypto, right? And so if you're not really interested in healthy food or the food business, then Farmers Fridge probably isn't for you. You may be able to talk about why this position matters for you in other ways, but there should be something that draws you to it, right?
Sure.
You should see that there is a place that you can be successful. You can look at it and say, there's a need, I can see I can fill that need and I can be a success here. And you should be looking for, like, are these the kind of people I want to work with, right? Is this the kind of place and environment that I think I would enjoy being and working with, So those are the kinds of things. And at the same time, I want to see you having thought through those things when I'm talking to you.
Sure. Is the culture ad or the non-technical perspective a big piece of your interviewing as well?
It is. I think, I think that can be a very undervalued, aspect. You may be, for lack of a better term, like an average engineer, but a great influence on the team, excited, happy, and you may add more value, you probably will, than somebody who's a better engineer who's just kind of like keeps them themselves and doesn't really add to the culture. So I think it's it's good to have a mix of people with different aspects, and I think all of those things can be an important glue to keep your team moving forward. So I think culture add is a very big deal.
Yeah, coming from the recruiting world into engineering, it's used to having a lot of extroverted people who are always almost too many team activities, right? Or people too willing to set that up versus like being on a couple teams where there wasn't very much of that at all. Even having like one person on a team, right, who puts in a little bit of effort around, like, I don't know, growth or team bonding or something does make a huge difference, right? Because you're like, oh, it's easy to, especially in a remote world, to be maybe shorter with people than you need to be just because you don't know them all that well, versus like, oh, I know Arne, so maybe I'm going to put a little bit more thought into my wording of this message, right?
I think it's a lot easier to misinterpret things, of course, in the remote world, right? Particularly since a lot of your communication is through slacking somebody or emailing somebody, and then because of that, it's also a lot easier to form like cliques.
Sure.
This is my go-to group of people to talk to, which means people can feel left out. So to have the people that really want to make sure that everybody's being included and gets their opinion heard, I think is even more important in a remote world than it was when everybody was in the office.
Totally. So I've never worked in an office as an engineer, right? Everything's been remote. I haven't even thought about, there's an aspect of like just being in an office, you're going to walk by people and therefore maybe more likely to include them, versus like on Slack, if we don't message regularly, we might not talk for weeks, right?
Yeah, I used to try to set up when we were in offices, my engineers to be back to back to each other. So like, in a row, so that somebody could kind of roll back and say, hey, like I'm running into this problem, and then they may be asking one person, but there's enough people around them so that, everybody got to, hear and offer opinions and things, which could be a little distracting, but I also thought it was good for them to communicate and make sure everybody felt included. And that's a much harder thing to do in a remote world, right?
Sure. I mean, I paired with two people the other day, like at the same time, because someone just offhand mentioned, oh, I'm going to go do this thing with so-and-so. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do it. Can I be a part of that? Right. That's, I think, the first time I've thought about doing that in this setting versus like in an office where when I was recruiting early on, it was all pod structure, just like you mentioned.
Right.
Almost everything I learned was through osmosis, right? I'd hear somebody say something and I go, oh, I don't know that, right? And then ask someone else or ask that person once they got done with that call, like, how did you handle that? Or how did you think of that, right? And then it kind of just led me down pathways I wouldn't have probably discovered on my own. So it's interesting. Do you have a standardized system when you're doing interviews? And if you do, can you kind of walk me through that, what that process looks like?
Yeah, we do. So we'll do a phone screen to start with. Well, you talk to the recruiter first. So you'll talk to one of the recruiters and they'll kind of run through a phone screen with you. We have scripts so that everybody gets the same set of questions. So the interview experience is pretty consistent. It's a good anti-biasing technique too. We try not to have the conversation that you and I did at the beginning, which is, hey, how's it going?
Sure,
script, because that actually can bias you. So we'll go right into the script. The scripts are set up so that there's a couple of softball questions in the beginning, and then we get into some real ones so that you can kind of relax the person, kind of like, an exam when you were in school. You set some softball stuff up so people are relaxed, and then you go into the details. And they cover two areas. One is, to see they get you in questions that are supposed to give us an indication of what kind of environments you like, where you want to work, what's important to you, and then other questions about your work to see if we can get an idea of your technical aptitude. So that's the phone screens, and then we'll do a full loop after you get there. So you pass phone screens, you'll do a coding exercise, which is a take-home coding exercise. You bring it and present it to the team, and you'll meet with the product managers, the engineering manager, have a tech team interview with just an interview style, and then you usually meet with me or maybe one of our senior directors at the end to kind of have questions about the company, just more for that person to get a chance to ask questions and understand what the company is doing, get more company directional questions. But that's kind of a softball section as well, because you've already gone through the tough parts.
Yeah. Nice.
And each section does have focus areas so that you're not getting asked the same sets of questions by every different group, right? So making sure that they stay in their focus areas so that you get new questions every time, not the same set of questions over and over again.
Yeah. Good. That's helpful. It is funny when you go to interviews and you have, 4 different people asking you the same things. Like, do you want a different answer, or did you just not talk to the person before?
It is very awkward, because you feel like, should I say the same thing? Because I think I nailed it last time, but maybe I should say something different.
Right. Are they comparing my answers to see if because I have, I don't know, I feel like this is somewhat of a good habit to have. Like, the behavioral type questions you're going to get on a regular, like you get the same types of questions, like, tell me about a challenging experience and how you overcame that, like those types of things, right? Like, I have memorized questions in my head, but I can spit them out really well. I can give you a really good 1-minute version of that. But I do feel like if someone recorded me doing that, it would sound almost exactly the same later, right? Which feels bad, right? If that's the way it's coming out. But yeah, good to have a variety of questions. I'm curious about the product side. So this is something I've seen more and more, and having recently gone through a job search, I feel like I met with more product folks during the interviews than I was expecting to. Is that something that y'all deliberately put up as a part of the process because you've seen the importance of having someone product focused in those interviews? Or I'm just curious if you can share a little bit more about that.
Well, obviously, and it depends too on if you're more of a front end person, we'll throw some design people in the loop. Sure. So, it depends on, but you should, the engineering manager and the product manager are going to be your primarily people that, that give you the work and you're going to be talking to on a day-to-day basis. So the engineering manager is really going to want to know how you take engineering direction and what's important to you and things, right? And the product person is going to want to know how connected you are to the business, if you take pride in your work actually solving business problems, right? So I think it's useful for both to come in with an opinion, because there is a different aspect to engineers who want to solve the one problem as to who want to solve the other problem, right? And the people that do a mix. You can be useful in any one of those groups, right? But it's good to get both people's opinions to make sure that we know what this person's going to do, where they're going to fit. If we have a bunch of people who are very strong with delivering business, solutions, then you might be happy to have somebody with a stronger engineering bent who really wants to focus on those areas, right? So that's kind of why we put them both in there. It's a bit of a long-winded answer, but I think you get different perspectives from the two different, engineering managers you would from a product manager.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. This is my first job where I've worked with maybe a actual developed product team, right? Rather than just kind of ad hoc, engineering managers who kind of does the product stuff on the side. So that's insightful. So I'm assuming you probably don't do a ton of technical interviews yourself now whenever you're in job searches, but how do you feel you've done in technical interviews in the past? Do you feel like you were great at them, terrible at them, somewhere in between?
It depended, over the years I got worse, we'll say. Part of it is, the acceptable coding practices have changed over the decades, right?
Sure.
So, what I learned graduating from college in the 90s is a little different than people learn today. And, unit tests weren't things, testing code didn't exist. And so over the years, when I get in technical interviews, and I still get technical interviews from time to time, which I think is kind of funny. And I can code, it's not like I can't do it, but I don't, my code style doesn't really match the modern world. And I feel I get, it's not that my code didn't meet the solution, it's that it doesn't usually meet what they think is good coding practices today. So
Sure.
I'll get knocked out. So early on, I did very well, and as I just get further along, they do less well. Plus, you get further, depending on the company you interview with, a lot of the coding exercises are focused on very small, discrete solutions. So, like something you can knock out in 3 or 4 hours or less. That's something I haven't done since I was in college.
Sure.
So I'm not used to thinking you're used to being part of a gargantuan system, not used to writing something that is, a small solution. And I think that also your ability to do that weakens over the years. So you look less good compared to somebody who just came out of college, which is, and they would say like, oh, he's got over 20 years of coding experience. I thought he would just bang that out. But I find you actually get worse at it over time.
Sure. That actually makes a lot of sense, because rather than thinking in like ticket size, you're thinking in sprint sized or quarter size chunks, right? Which is a totally different type of thing, because I don't do that type of thinking at all right now. When someone asks me like, how would you set up this whole system, like those types of system design interviews, I go, I don't make those decisions. Like, I guess I should think about that, but somebody else makes those decisions and I get a piece of that I do, right? And like, that's almost two totally different skill sets, right?
And I mean, it's, everybody can write a discrete piece of code, but I think it takes somebody who's not been in it for a long time longer, right?
Sure.
Because you're used to thinking of writing something that is supposed to be part of a gargantuan system. It has to be, it has to be formatted to fit that kind of environment.
Do you have any system that you use? So you run into a technical problem, or you're in an interview, or you're given some type of technical problem you don't have an immediate solution for. Like, how do you break that down, or try to kind of take pieces off so you can start making progress on it?
That's something actually, when I also did not grow, grow as an engineer when we did pair programming. So I know when the people expect me to ask more questions, I have to remind myself that I am not working by myself, that I have to ask questions. So, but that is something. So when I'm going through one of those things and we're pair programming, I have to remind myself to say, all right, talk through your thought process and say, all right, so I'm looking at it. I see you've got 6 things to do. I feel that, A and C are the 2 easiest to get done, and say, and this, kind of express why I think they're the easiest, and then go back and forth with them and see if they agree with me, and then, start working there. But yeah, generally try to, because it's usually you can break it down into, I see this many problems, I can see these seem to be easier, and let's work our way from the easiest down to the hardest. And then I have to remind myself to talk with the pair programmer through that and see if they agree with me, and like actually work through that, and then kind of start from there.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I think that just getting something down to, once you start to get it down to, I think some of those harder problems start to either become clear, like, okay, it's going to be really hard, or, oh, maybe I actually understand this piece and that's a little bit easier to tackle, right? So I think that puts you in a good spot.
And you can also transition into, okay, I didn't get to this, but if we were going to tackle this, this is how I think, like I've already laid out the groundworks for this and this, so we can use this to help us achieve that, which will move us into this direction. And you can, so if you don't tackle the most complex ones, usually you can start talking through how you would have done it.
I call that the hand waving, right? Where you don't actually have to do it. You just go like, I would have done this, right? Yeah. And a lot of times that's enough, right? At least in an interview, you can see, okay, you have an understanding of this, right? Even if we didn't get to implement that, right? Which maybe you get partial credit, right?
Yeah, I believe, you should, part of the exercise, whether it's coding or whatever we're doing, it should be just walking people through how you would solve a problem. It's more important than getting it exactly right, is proving that you can think your way through the problem and come to a solution.
Yeah, I've realized, especially in this most recent job search, is how much of interviewing is often just being able to conceptualize a problem that you have, no idea of until someone sends you a link or a big chunk of text, and having to translate that relatively quickly, right, into like, okay, I understand this, can repeat coherent thoughts back to you and start working on something, right? Like that piece sometimes is the most difficult piece. Even if you've seen a problem similar in the past, you might not immediately recognize it as like, oh, this is a similar thing, until you start working through it and you go, oh, okay, I actually get how to do this, right? So
I like, pairing more experienced engineers with younger engineers is a good thing, because I'll refer to the more experienced engineers as I've been there, done that, right?
sure.
I've seen this
Yeah.
problem before, and this is how we did it, right? But if you pair them, but if you have just those guys, they will just always approach every problem the same way they've always done in the past. If you pair them with younger engineers, they have a lot of ideas. They're excited about doing things. They have, they haven't done it before, so they'll actually help the more experienced engineers think of new ways of approaching things. But the more experienced engineers make sure they don't go totally off the rails and try something
Sure.
that is never going to get where they want to go.
Yeah, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but maybe you put some cool rims on it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, great. But do you have any other advice or tips for engineers who are maybe going through technical interviews or just about to start a job search?
Do your research is always a good thing. Know the company you're interviewing for. And a surprising, it seems like a silly question, but a surprising number of engineers I talk to, I'll say, why do you want to come work for Farmers Ridge? Totally flubbed that question. And Trunk Club as well. They didn't do the research. They don't really know. They just saw something, they applied to it, and they didn't bother to dig into it. And it's a good indication to me of how much you really care about this job and want this job, right? So spending some time doing that research means you'll be able to answer that question in a thing that is grounded to you. And you should be talking about something you believe, not just, look it up and regurgitate something.
Sure.
And it also helps, you when it comes time for your questions, if you did your research, to do that. And a lot of engineers will just skip that part, thinking I'm an engineer, I don't really have to know much about the company. But it does, people who care about the company tend to stay longer, tend to want to contribute more, and are generally happier. So it's, and if you do the research and you're not interested in the company, then probably not the place you should be interviewing, right?
Sure.
So I think that's the thing that engineers get most, because day to day you program, right? So that will come out, but you're talking to a company and you want to also present yourself in the light of really caring about that company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I agree, often overlooked. Probably one of the few ways to flub that last conversation with yourself or some other stakeholder, right? Is they ask you a question like that and you go, I like food.
Yeah. And you're surprised. And it sounds like such a softball question. I'm like, how are you not prepared for that? But
sure.
It's a surprisingly good indicator of how well the person will succeed, or if we make an offer, whether they will accept that offer.
Sure.
And if they flub it, and then we bring somebody in, they frequently leave fairly quickly. So I'm like, this is a really big indicator of how much you want to be here.
Interesting. And something that I feel like doesn't take a huge amount of time to figure out, because it could be you love the business model, but it also could be, well, I think you're doing interesting stuff with, these machines are interesting to be able to do some type of technical work on a physical thing versus only web stuff. That's probably an interesting enough answer, right? Something.
It's hard to get the question wrong if you really talk about something you care about and how that company can execute. Could be the food, could be our tech stack, could be the people, could be, could be that you're excited about the way we're going to be using data to do some AI to figure something out. Any of those are acceptable answers. It just has to be something that actually indicates that you know something that we do and care about the company and what we're doing, wherever it is.
Sure. Yeah. Do you have any different advice or additional advice for folks? Maybe this is their first job search or their second job search, their early career.
It depends on where you come from. App ops, a boot camp. If you go through a boot camp, you get some pretty intensive learning for a short period of time. But it really doesn't match up with somebody who's you go through a college program and you go 4 years, right? it's not as intensive, but you've done 4 years of coding. The thought patterns are much more embedded into your head, right? You've been
Sure.
through it much more often. So if you're trying to find something coming out of a boot camp, it's good to find a place that'll give you, a soft landing to grow from, right?
Sure.
To work your way into being a full-time engineer. I know a lot of them want to go right into being embedded in an engineering team, but I've seen that really, either really stress the people out, or or they give up because it's too hard. So finding a way to ramp into being an engineer, that should be your goal, right? You should be want to become, but finding a place that will give you a path where you don't have to have the expectation of delivering at a high rate from day one, because you have to pick up a couple of years worth of programming to really be comfortable with that, right?
Sure.
And you think like, well, it's a college kid, how much more can they know? But they've been coding for 4 years, right?
Sure.
So that's one. So I think, looking for a place that, either has a good apprenticeship program or has some alternate program that you can work for a while to move your way in is important for your success, for your wanting to continue this career and all those things. Having an entryway that gets you that chance to learn enough to be successful is important. For college kids, it's just it's tough. You got to find the companies that are actually looking for people that are, doing that. Obviously, your internships matter, but there's going to be plenty of places that are looking for people coming out of college. A good place for somebody coming out of college to first go is someplace that's pretty intense, and gives you lots of chances to learn across the stack. So small to mid-sized companies, I think, are very good because you get a chance to get your hands on a lot of stuff. If you go to a very large company, you end up very siloed, and you'll learn one thing very, very well, but you don't get the broad set of knowledge that can help you figure out what you want to do with your career and help you broaden yourself and have more job options as you go forwards, right? So I think a lot of people look at a big company and go, oh, this would be great, but then you get very siloed because they have hundreds and hundreds of engineers, so you get a very small perspective of what you're working on.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's great advice. I think consulting companies too often hire early career folks like straight out of college, and I think every role is different, every company is different, but often people will see 3-4 different clients over the course of a couple of years, and that is kind of a wealth of experience, and you're expected to do billable hours.
I agree with that. That is a great way is coming out of college to get exposure to lots of different things, different techniques, different areas of the company, and broaden yourself, because your early years should be about broadening your knowledge, not just of your tech, but the business, so that you can feel more comfortable working in different areas and find a place that you really like.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, before we head into the break, any interviewing horror stories that you have from either side of the table that you're willing to share that maybe people can relate to?
I have plenty, but we'll go with my trunk club interview. So when I went,
you got the job though.
I got the job, but yeah. So and I think I did pretty well most of the section, but for some reason I didn't bring my laptop. I didn't. Okay. I don't know why I didn't think I needed to bring a laptop, but I didn't. So so they found me a laptop because they had a pair coding exercise where I was working with another engineer, right? And so I was a PC guy. Now I have Macs, but up until then I'd never used a Mac. So they gave me a Mac, and I'm working with it. And on the PC, Control C and Control V are cut and paste, and on the Mac it's Command C and Command. So I kept working, A, I didn't know I was going to be coding, so I was kind of stressed out as this person is watching me code, and B, every time I tried to cut and paste my code, I would hit Control C and replace it with a C, and then I have to do the, oh right, so I barely got anywhere with the coding exercise. So I was having problems with the keyboard. I was had to explain why I forgot my PC. So I know I must have gotten the double thumbs down on the coding exercise, because I could barely get anywhere with it.
Yeah. Well, I think it goes to show that sometimes people are like, oh, they didn't go as well as I wanted to or well as I thought. And, you can still end up with an offer after that, right? Especially if it's maybe a position where that's not the most important thing.
And I think he felt bad for me after a while because he started saying, well, let's just talk through how would you set this up if, because saw me getting nervous, and as I was getting nervous, I was making more mistakes and
Sure.
doing that. Yeah. Trying to give me like some softball, like if you were to set up this function, how would you do it?
Yeah. Maybe talk through it, right? A little easier than trying to figure out the specific syntax, right? Yeah. Cool. Well, then let's take a break here. Then when we come back, we'll move into the interview portion. All right.
Great.
Thank you for watching the first half of the Professional Technical Interviewee. The technical interview will be released 1 week from this episode, so be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. New episodes are released on the first 4 Thursdays of each month. Find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Dorsett or on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on new episodes. And remember, keep practicing.